Welcome back to another episode of Divine Journey 2. In the last episode, we got our blood altar set up and upgraded to tier 3, and we also got access to both the Hellfire Forge as well as the Blood Infuser, and we also got access to the alchemy table. So the plan for this episode is I would like to get the incense altar, as that's going to make us sacrificing ourselves a lot more efficient, as we'll get quite a bit more blood per every time we frick ourselves. And I would also like to get down to these final quests here for this chapter if possible. So yeah, we'll see. Right, the issue with making this incense altar is we need to make these holy cores. And to actually make these holy cores, we have to make some of these haste reagents. And that takes these potions of haste 4, which can only be made in a whole chain of machines and such. And that is what this wall of machines is for. So I have one set up for haste, harming, absorption, strength, and swiftness. As these are, there might be a couple that I'm missing, but these are all the ones that are required for other reagents besides the haste. And basically the way this is set up is the first alchemical imbuers take the water and some netherwort, and it gets turned into awkward potions. And then the water is just supplied by this fluid interface, and all the other items and such are supplied by the interface. Then it goes into the second step, which is combining it with the actual catalyst to get the base potion. And then it goes through a glowstone step to bring it up to the second tier. And then for most of them, it goes through two fractioning stills, yeah, it goes through two fractioning still steps to get to the fourth step, or the fourth tier, I guess. And then finally, it goes through a fluid transposer where we actually get the actual potion. Now that we have our haste potions, we can make our haste reagents, which is just some glowstone, sugar blocks, and cookie jars, and potions of haste in the Hellfire Forge. And now we can make our 4 holy cores. Using 2 of these cores, we can make our Promise of Tenacity 2, and we can also make our Incense Altar. Now that we have our second tier of the Promise of Tenacity, we can also make our Diamond Promise Acceptor. Now that we have unlocked our Promise of Tenacity 2, I think we're going to sidetrack a bit and go up to this quest, which is the Dull Dust quest. And this is basically used for the Bloody Dust and the Blood Infuser, and that's actually used for the Spiked Plate, which is one of the things needed to automate the production of Evil Craft Blood. And to actually get this Blood Dust, it takes a few reagents that we have to make, mainly the Neutral, the Dirty, and the Wizard. So for the Dirty reagent, it's just the Salic Soil, Magmatic, Horse Dirt, and Aqueous Soil. Using some amethyst, opal, garnet, and amber, we can make our wizard's reagent. Alright, it turns out making this spiked plate is going to be a little more of an involved process, as this neutral reagent takes a minimum of 300 will, which means we're going to have to upgrade our Tartarg gems to the next tier, which means we're going to have to make some environmental cores, and then we're going to have to make some growth reagent, and we need the eucalyptus saplings, which we don't have. Luckily, there's an abyssal craft ritual for it. It's just 2 wildwood saplings, 2 aerothium, 2 empowered Anori crystals, and 2 moonglow leaves. Alright, I've planted both the eucalyptus saplings and actually had a few maple saplings sitting in the ME system, so I planted both of them in the little spot that we're harvesting trees, and I waited a little bit, and now we have enough to craft 6 growth reagents from bone blocks, melons, and the 2 different saplings. Now if we combine it with some Orbis Terra and empty cores and the blood orb, we can make our 2 environmental cores. And if we combine our wizard's reagent with some magicals, we can also make our 2 magical cores. Now we can combine all 3 cores plus a lesser Tartaric gem to get our common Tartaric gem. Another thing we need for this dull dust is some of this crepitus, and we actually need to make some of these concentrated catalysts, which take both iron and tin shards, and we get that from chemically injecting iron or tin with hydrogen chloride. So I set up these 2 chemical injection chambers here, and behind here there's a chemical infuser which gets hydrogen and chlorine. And the way I'm getting the chlorine is from this electrolytic separator with the brine, and then the hydrogen is just from this electrolytic separator, which is separating out water. And then I just have the pipes running all the way under into this chemical infuser. And then we just need to combine it with 2 RF powder and 2 strengthened catalysts, and there's our concentrated catalysts. Then to actually make crepitus, it's the concentrated catalyst, the Terra, the Orbis Terra, Grains of Infinity, double compressed cobblestone, and mob grindium. The last ingredient we need for our dull dust is the neutral reagent, and that's just light gray concrete, clay blocks, blocks of quartz, and glass. Right, now we can make our 4 dull dust. And if we run our dull dust in the infuser, we'll get our bloody dust. Alright, and if we combine it with some mob grindium, dark blocks, and spikes, there's our spiked plate. Alright, we also need to make this sanguinary pedestal, which takes some offensive cores, and we have to make both offensa and damage reagents. And to actually make the damage reagents, it's a dreadium reinforced shield, a dreadium sword, a lava bucket, and a potion of harming. Alright, after a bit more crafting, we can make some offensa, which is some concentrated catalysts, incendium, magicals, the ender, Eden arrows, and splash potions of harming. Alright, now we can make our offensive core by combining the offensa and the damage reagents. And now we can make our sanguinary pedestal. Alright, I've come to our mob farm and I've set up the pedestal up here. And then the plate sits on top of this, and I just have a conduit extracting the blood into this black hole tank. Alright, now that we have our incense altar, it's not going to do very much on its own, since it only gives a 20% bonus every time we sacrifice ourselves. So to actually increase that bonus, we're going to make some wooden paths. Alright, to actually increase the effectiveness of this incense altar, using these wooden paths, we need to place a little 3x3 platform on each of the 4 different sides. These wooden platforms don't actually increase the tranquility. What actually increases the tranquility is what we put in these 4 different corners, and that can be found in the Blood Magic book. And some things are crops, logs, leaves, lava netherrack, farmland, water, life essence, and some other stuff. And pretty much you can't plant the same thing, as that'll have diminishing returns, so we're gonna have to do a little variety of everything. So I'm gonna gather a couple things and I'll be back. And also, if we want to increase the range further, we can make some stone paths. And to actually extend it, we just have to place them on the ends of these pathways. Alright, I've taken some time to look at the wiki, and I managed to get up to 2600 tranquility. And we actually can't go any further because the worn paths require the next tier of blood orb, and we don't get that until the next chapter. So this is the max we can do right now. But I managed to get 6 of every vanilla crop, excluding melons and pumpkins, in this little farm area. And then over here there's some lava, some netherrack, and then a netherwort which hasn't fully grown yet, and some fire. Over here is just some life essence. And then here's some grass, some leaves, and different types of logs. And yeah, we're up to 2600. I've drained out our blood altar, so let's see how much life essence we get now. 21,000 per prick. That's a pretty nice upgrade. And plus, I think these self-sacrifice runes also affect how much we get as well. I think we're going to sidetrack here for a bit and automate a whole bunch of alchemy tables. And I've looked at all the different recipes, and I think we need 20 for right now. If we have to make more, then I'll make more. But to actually make these, the difficult part is the Dreadium, and that's just because I'm waiting on this transmutator here, which is taking years. So I think we're going to automate this too. So to actually do that, we're going to need a couple ender chests. I'm actually not going to use an ender chest here in the void world, as I forgot we had our quantum ring here for a second. So I just ran some cable over and hooked up a storage bus to all the different outputs we get from our powered spawners. And in the nether here, instead of having a separate drawer wall for all the mob drops, I just put an ender chest here instead, and I changed around a few of the different filters and such. And then here in the overworld, this links up to this ender chest here, and then there's a conduit right here extracting into this drawer controller. And then I moved all of our different drawers for all the nether drops over on this wall over here. And then I connected it with some trim behind there. And finally, here in the end, I've also hooked up another ender chest that links back to that storage wall for all the other drops and such from the Enderman. I've set up the transmutator here, and it's getting the dreaded shards of Abyssalite and turning them into the ingots. And then I just have this phantom face here. Since this machine is sided, I have on the side, it's inserting the blaze rods, and on the top, it's inserting the actual shards. And then on the bottom, it's just extracting it into the drawer. And there's our Dreadium. Alright, I've begun the process of automating some of the blood magic essences we need, and one of them we need for Aether is actually this arrow gel, and that's what this little setup does. And eventually this is just temporary right now until we get mystical agriculture seeds so we can craft this. But the way this works is there's a mechanical user here with lava buckets on use item and redstone pulse mode. And then the lava just comes from this tank here. The empty buckets go in, the lava buckets come out. Then there is a scanner. There's a block detector here set to aerogel. That'll emit a redstone pulse when there's aerogel here. It'll go into this sequencer here. And then once it reaches these 4 little ending dots, I guess, it'll emit a redstone pulse after that delay, and that'll activate the next lava bucket to be placed. And then there's this auto breaker here, which will pick up the aerogel and put it into the drawer. And the reason we have to do this delay here is if there's aerogel in this spot and this mechanical user tries to place a lava bucket when there's aerogel here, the game will actually crash, which is not very good. So that's why this sequencer is needed. Otherwise, I would just run the redstone straight into the mechanical user. But having this sequencer here avoids that. And then there's just a bunch of storage upgrades and a void upgrade on this drawer, so it'll never fill up. And it should, in theory, never break. Alright, I've taken some time here to automate both simple catalysts and all of the tier 1 essences. And the way I'm doing that is through the use of item ducts and these resonant retrievers. So the way I have these set up is there's this interface here supplying it with all the input items needed. And then every retriever on this alchemy table corresponds to a different item. And they're all set to keep 64 max total items in the inventory at one time. Because if we didn't have filters on this, then it would just fill all the slots with one item, and obviously the craft wouldn't work. And obviously it's not crafting right now because there's no blood orb in there, but if it were to craft like that, it would get pulled out by this, the simple catalyst would get pulled out by this servo here and go into the drawer. And then there's this filter here just to make sure that the simple catalysts don't go back into the system. And then if you look closely, the retrievers actually pull 2 stacks of items at once. So the first stack will go in fine, but since these slots are all filled now, the only place for the items to go is back into this interface, and that's why I have this filter here. Otherwise, the retrievers would all get stuck with items and such, and it wouldn't work. And then a small modification for this, for the Incendium and the, what is this, Aqua Salus, I think, is they both take either, that one takes lava buckets, this one takes water buckets, and then when the craft is actually done, there is empty buckets in here. So that's what these 2 phantom faces are for. And they just have a item conduit with empty buckets to pull out the empty buckets and put them back into the system. But other than that, this works completely the same to the first one over there, just minus the phantom face. So if we actually start a craft, it'll craft it, the output will go into the drawer like before, and then the 2 water buckets will get taken out and go back to the system. What's also nice about these retrievers is since Incendium takes 2 pyrotheum per, you can actually set it to be more than a stack, keeping a stack in stock. So I have this keeping 2 stacks in stock. So that's very nice. And it still works the same. It crafts and then the buckets get extracted and go into the interface, just like the other systems. And also, since we're using item bucks, we can just cover over these with the covers from thermodynamics, which is very nice. And the only problem is, since we don't have automated LP yet, we kind of have to babysit and swap orbs between every alchemy table. Also, we have to refill it. We have to refill our blood orb every time it depletes. And we're actually going to have to do that until we get to chapter 17, where we can make the ritual diviner for the Well of Suffering. So I think I'm going to end this episode here. And in between episodes, I'll obviously automate the tier 2 and tier 3 essences and catalysts and such. But yeah, thanks for watching.